The winger fullback position, arguably the most divisive position in fantasy, and one that we've got a few different pods for here, Biz. Let's tear right in with this first guy, future premiership winner, Parramatta superstar, Isaiah Yongi, coming off one first grade game last year and likely stepping into a first grade spot. How do you feel about this pickup at 350k?
Look, I think it's a no-brainer. You pick him up. Do I feel great about it? I mean, better than Mamazoulis, better than Pakes, better than Sandon Smith. But look, I think he's a mid-30s to early 40s guy. He's not going to be a keeper at all. But he averaged about 40 in reserve grade as a starter. But in that one game for Penrith last year, 256 metres with 8 tackle breaks. He had a scintillating try assist on the weekend, a great cut-out ball to Jake Tungo, who scored a great try in the corner. I think you start him. I think, look, my only concern is that Josh Papali, when he played fullback after Yonga came off, was electric as well. He was
Yeah.
very good, equally as good. And there could be a position battle. Like, I mean, no one's actually come out and really said it's guaranteed his spot for the whole year. If he doesn't start at crash hot, you could maybe see Josh Papali or even Lomax or someone go to the back there. But I think, like, don't overthink that. This is one where you don't have to do too much analysis. He's going to be one of the most owned players. Get him in and build your fullbacks around him.
Agree completely. Not going to be a total fantasy superstar, but must have, put him in, set and forget. Second spot here, Kalen Ponga sitting in my list. And Ponga is one who really represents my view on the fullback position. So at winger fullback, you're typically picking guys up for hot runs. And as we get into the season, we tend to see guys sort of get cheaper, get more expensive, all that sort of thing. And you're trying to buy guys when they're a bit cheaper before a hot run. So Ponga at the start of the year, based on fixtures, looks like a guy who could be on a hot run, with those first 5 fixtures being Tigers, Dolphins, Titans, Bulldogs, and then Tigers again, right?
Jeez. Could
Yeah,
average
so
100.
mate, it's hot. It's hot. I will say the background data, though, I don't think he's going to average 60 this year. Like, I don't have him doing that over a full season. So priced at a 54. Last few years, if you go to full games at fullback, it's been 56, 61, and 46. That 61 year was on the back of an absolutely insane tear. So Jared Hayne 09 sort of levels only got to a 61, right? So I think over the year, he'll end up about the same price and about the same average. But I think that start could be super hot for Kalen Ponga.
Yeah, in a year where like the fullback options are quite dicey, as you say, not guaranteed. I think he's in my team right now
Yep.
with Yongi. So, look, I just think that run to start the year, if you don't own him for the first 5 fixtures, like, why would you ever own him at all? Like,
Oh, yeah.
if you're not going to have him for that run, you're not going to want him in your team. So, if you're a believer of Ponga, get him in. He's kind of always shown that he could average 60, but always ends up at 54, 55, like you say. Like, no matter what happens, injury, suspensions, bad runs of form, good runs of form, always ends up at the same thing every year. But yeah, I love Kellen Ponga. He didn't do that great fantasy wise in the All Stars game,
Mm.
but he's just looks great this preseason in general. He looks fit. He looks motivated.
Mm.
Um, look, we kind of spoke about it briefly in the centers video for some reason, but look, Sharp and Gamble as the halves. I mean, come on, like,
Yep.
who's kicking 400, 500 kick meters there? Like, no, like, it's going to Ponga who's going to kick for 200, 300. So it has really potential upside there. Only way that doesn't happen is if Cogger or Hastings ends up as the 7. But if they do run out with Gamble and Sharp, like, neither of them, I can imagine, are going to dominate the kick meters. And
Yep.
yeah, look, yeah, I think just get him in if you can.
I can't
If you need
see
to
that,
choose
though.
one gun, it's Ponga.
Yeah. That halves pairing, I cannot see them being the halves pairing in round 5, for example, after the
I can't
bye
even
round.
see it happen in round 1. I just feel like Gamble played well in the trial and they want to give him more minutes here.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But
Surely.
Ponga's a decent shout. This is where we get different. So spot 3, I'll throw it to you first, then I'll jump in with mine.
We've gone at the same team, but I've gone Keanu Keeney.
Mm.
And I think this is the year where there's no real clarity on who the value options are at fullback. There's no great cash cow options other than Yongi. So I think Keeney, priced at 47.7 or so, has the upside 55 plus average. And we saw him get super hot last year. Anytime he wasn't in your team, Longy, he'd score 80. Every time you bought him, disappear, go and cease. So as long as you're not going him in your top 5, I'm confident Keeney can churn out a 55 average. I mean, we kind of spoke about him last year. He averaged about 56, 57 in reserve grade, and he was total garbage to start the year with like two sub
Yep.
20 scores. Everyone traded him out, and then he came back in mid-season and he became the form fullback.
Yeah.
He went 70, 35, 70, 80, 70, like just went crazy.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, no one's talking about Campbell at fullback. No one's talking about Brimson at fullback. It is Keeney at fullback. Not a single person has said
Yep.
anything otherwise. He has made that his spot. Will be a very pod option given that he has the bye week one. A lot of people are talking about the next guy who you're going to mention.
Yep.
Not enough people are talking about Keeney. I am on the upside. Not in my team at current, but there's a few Titans I'm kind of thinking
Yeah.
about.
Yep.
I only want one because I don't want three good Titans on the bye, but he is
Yep.
an interesting option for sure.
I'm with you there. You have to take one Titan pod. I'm totally with you there. I think one of these guys has to find their way into your team. Keeney's a weapon. I will not buy him, so he'll be Dally M Player of the Year this year. And I don't
Sweet.
think I'll buy him. He could average 100 for the first 5 weeks. I don't think I'd buy him. I just can't do it again. But that's a personal thing. The fact that I won't buy him means you can rest assured that he'll score well for you guys. So you're covered there, Biz. I'm going to Jaden Campbell with mine. And Campbell is just one of those guys who he looks like he finds fantasy points in everything he does. Loves getting his hands on the ball, loves running the ball. I want to go through a few stats here that sort of indicate to me that he can jump up to that 60 average in the future too. So priced at a 54 right now. You're needing big points out of him to be valued there. Historical average last year was 57 when he played 5'8". But what I want to point out there was a 57 with only 168 kick meters. So I expect that to increase this year if he's next to AJ Brimson. And I'll probably start with him if he's next to AJ Brimson. Now, Brimson, historical average when he plays in the halves for kick meters is only 89 meters, right? So you would assume he's probably not going to be a dominant kicker. And if they were thinking that Brimson would be the dominant kicker, when he played in the trial on the weekend, he would have had more than 26 kick meters, right? So clearly the plan is not for him to practice any sort of kicking. Keeney's not a kicker. You know, whoever they have at hooker, whether it's Randall or I've forgotten Verrills, whoever else, they're not kickers
Charles,
either.
yeah,
So I think Campbell is the guy who's going to
Tina.
be doing a lot of that dominant kicking. So you essentially get KO weeks plus the dominant physical running game of Jaden Campbell. And theoretically, that could be a 60-plus average at wing fullback. I'll then throw into a bit of concern for me. All-Stars game, only 98 kick meters in that game. So he was next to Peru, who's a bit more of a noted kicker. Wasn't the dominant kicker, but I think he could be for the Titans in round one. So Jaden Campbell's a guy who at 722K, he's not cheap. He's priced about the same as Kalen Ponga. But the longer the preseason goes, the more I think I might go Jaden Campbell and take advantage of that loophole.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't mind it. My questions in that regard are in the years he's played, he's only really had one fantasy relevant year where he was
Yep.
crash hot, and that was last year. Was that a flash in the pan, or was that true personal development from him?
Mm-hmm.
And does he have another gear to give? I mean, a lot of people are saying that this 54 is his base, and now we're adding kick meters. But let's remember, 54 has not been his historical base.
Mm-hmm.
It was a kind of real great year for him. I'm not saying he can't do it. He's still a young player. He looked good. He does score in all categories. The offload buff last year really helped, or the year before, or whenever that 4-point offload came into play. He loves an offload. But I don't think it's as clear cut as 54 plus kick meters. I think you have to really assess whether 54 was his true kind of form going forward.
You could forecast a bit of a drop off in some of the other stats, so some of the attacking stats as well. But he was getting some big scores without big attacking plays in games.
Yeah.
So that's the bit that makes me confident. The other thing that I like here is you go from a Titans team last year that was running, Jamin Jolliffe in the starting side, Chris Randall as their lock. They didn't have Fafita for, certain parts of the year playing at his best. They were uncertain who their fullback was, all this other stuff. To going through a full preseason and adding Tino and RCG as your starting props, right? So that base is going to be fantastic. Like they're going to be very solid through the middle. They're going to find themselves in better field position than they did last year. And theoretically, they should be in a like a much better shape for Campbell to take advantage. So, yeah, I think that you could forecast a bit of a drop off in some of those fluky stats, but then the increase in ability from the Titans forward pack should increase some of the opportunities for attacking players as well. So I think you could maybe say he might be a little bit more volatile, but the upside has increased this year for me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I think. Look, I don't. My personal view is he doesn't have that much value, but I
yep.
think you're potentially getting a keeper early on in the season um, for lower than the others at that kind of
And a
keeper
non-owned
range.
pod. That's
Yeah,
that's the appeal to me. Like he's a guy who, if the Titans are all right, he could go nuclear a few times, and you get those
yeah,
big pod scores out of him, as opposed to a common guy like Kalen Ponga or some other guys we're going to talk about further down this list.
yeah, for sure. And speaking of going back to the Knights, Kane Ponga, his winger mate Greg Marzou, both are number fours.
Yep.
481k priced at 36. He averaged 53 in 2023. And that was maybe a potential flash in the pan for sure. Because if you look at his historical stats, he averaged about 41 and 39 at the Titans in 2022, 2021. But like we spoke about, Ponga has an incredibly hot first 5 games.
Mm.
And he looked good against the Eels in the preseason trial. He scored a try, 129 meters in one half of football. He looked really strong. He was
Yep.
cranking out hit ups, really rocking it up. So he looked very fit, back to his best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, look, the problem with things is if you do start Ponga, and if you're going guys like Dylan Lucas and Bradman Best,
Yep.
and you've got 3 or 4 nights, and all of a sudden round 4 bye, you've got half your back line sitting out. It doesn't work out. But other than that, I think it's a great potential mid-range option. I don't think he's going to average 50. I do think that was a flash in the pan year, but I think he can average 50 over the first 5 weeks,
Yep.
first 5 or 6 weeks. So I think he'll kind of moderate back at a mid-40s average. But I think, look, while especially at the start of the year where it's the fullback position is a bit sketchy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not many great options, I
Yep.
think Marzu is a pretty decent value option.
Yeah, it's him or Ponga. I agree with you there. And yeah, number 4 on my list as well. He, like, 36 last year is about as bad as he can do, in my view. Like, I can't imagine him averaging below 36. If you go through the list and look at some of the guys who averaged 40 last year, there's some very poor fantasy players who averaged 40 points. So Greg Marzou should be in the 40s this year. If you get 45 out of him across the season, that's fine. But if you can get some tries out of him in those first games, that's fantastic. I would throw in too, there's some other guys who aren't on either of our lists, like Ryan Pappenhausen, for example, who is more expensive than Marzu, doesn't represent as much value. He doesn't have that big upside in my mind. So yeah, I'd rather go Marzu. Another one, Blaze Talangi's at that price point too, could be interesting, very attack and stat reliant. But Marzu feels like the safest bet in that sort of category of wing fullback.
Who I do have in my 5th spot, though, is Reece Walsh. Not many people are talking about him. I just think Walsh is probably the youngest of this generation of fullbacks that's kind of still on the upwards. I think obviously Brisbane are expected to improve this year, adding Ben Hunt. I think they're going to be healthier than last year. I think last year was a bit of an odd season for them. I think Madge will be good for him. It'll teach him like the kind of details in his game. Unclear about the goal kicking with Reynolds. If he gets the goal kicking, great. If not, I think Walsh has more to give. I think Walsh can go from that tier 2 fullback to a tier 1 fullback this year. He's not on my side because, look, I'm paying for Pong already. I don't think I can pay for Walsh, but I don't see why he can't. Look, I'm just really high on. Like, he might be the most raw talented fullback available.
Yep.
And he's still coming into his own. And I definitely see a year. You know how Turbo had that one year where he averaged 70, 80 odd. I see Walsh
90, I think.
maybe, yeah, well, something ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't see Walsh going to that extreme, but I do see a year where he averages 60, 65 plus, just from excellent form, a lot of tries, a lot of assists. So that could be this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's going to be tons of attacking opportunities for him. I'm probably more interested in him for Supercoach and a Supercoach draft than I am for fantasy, but I just don't love players who can come off after a half of footy and be on 3 points. That's something I try to steer away from. But also, he can then finish that game and score 100 points. So yeah, Walsh is an interesting one. There's really a lot of guys you can take here. The Turbo, Ponga, Latrell, Walsh category of players. Tedesco, we haven't even talked about as well. He's a guy who could step up in a weaker Roosters side. We haven't talked about Tyrone Munro, who's actually in my team right now on the bench. He's not a guy I was desperate to get, but at that price point, I just had to get the depth.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, is there anyone else that we really want to throw
Dylan
in?
Edwards, like
Yeah.
losing the goal kicking back to Cleary, Cleary taking more,
Yep.
not great. I mean, Lomax going back to centre had a career year. I don't see him backing it up. Drinkwater is an interesting one, actually. I think
Yeah.
if Duffy wasn't playing and Drinkwater was kicking goals, Drinkwater goes into my top four,
Yep.
maybe even top three above Keeney. In fact, I think he could be my third fullback if he's
Yep.
confirmed to be goal. Because you know what you're getting with Drinkwater, it's like 45 to 47, and then if you add 6 to 8 points in goals, that
Yep.
gets him to the mid 50s. So I would take that value there, but there's no confirmation if he's going to be gulking. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
roast him for
If you
now.
got goal kicking, I agree with that. My starting wing fullbacks right now. So Ruben Garrick, I mentioned on the center video, he is in my wing
Yep.
fullback spot as of today. Greg Marzu, and then Yongi is my third. So I've gone quite cheap at wing fullback. And then on the bench, I have McLean, who we didn't mention as well. And right now, I don't actually have Munro, but I may include him at some point. I like his try scoring ability, and I think he'll be solid enough.
Yeah, and which McLean are you talking about, Casey or Jesse? Who are you backing?
Jesse. So
Yeah,
base price, right? He's a bit of a placeholder.
yeah,
We'll see
yeah.
if he gets a spot.
Yeah, it sounds like you want. I mean, similar to me, I've got Yongi there, I've got Ponga there. I deleted my other fullbacks. I don't have a third, fourth, fifth fullback there right now, just because it's so.
Yep.
It's like I want Marzu, but I've got Dylan Lucas
Mm,
and Ponga already, so I won't go
can't do
Marzu.
it, yeah.
I've got Fafita sitting there, so Keeney I don't want. But I think Mark Noah, you say it.
No one
He'll
needs
be
to ask,
sitting there.
eh?
Yeah,
I've been
he'll be
working.
sitting there for now. Yeah, he's been working on it. You do, yeah. You're mate. This is why you're the casual athlete himself. Um, yeah, look, I've only Munro's been kind of in and out, not fully sold. McLean, Jesse if he gets the spot, but wing fullback is the one I think that's going to be most volatile for me
Yeah.
over the next 7-8 days.
Yeah, if we get the right cash cows, I could just go really cheap there and make Marzu
Yeah,
my top wing fullback. Like I'm kind of leaning that way a bit.
really. So you'd be willing? I can't get rid of Ponga with that hot
Yeah.
first five. I just can't. I don't like he
Yep.
didn't even score that well in like the All Stars game. He didn't look great, but I just that first five, he will go
Yep.
crazy.
If Ponga averages 65 over that first five and Marzu averages 50 to 55, I'm happier with Marzu. You're getting him
No, I agree.
much cheaper,
Agree.
right? And I think the
Yeah.
Marzu 50 to 55 is more attainable than the Ponga 65. I
Mm.
also think, guys like Ponga, I bet all these wing fullbacks, at some point in the year, they're usually pretty affordable. And there's a reason Ponga goes on these hot runs and then ends up at 54 because he has a quiet run as well. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's just the way I've set up my roster. Like I had to make space for guys like Angus Crichton, and I'm now going to
Yeah.
have to make space for Kalal Matangi as well. So for me,
Yeah.
that just means I don't have too many big dogs in the back line.
No, for sure. And I can definitely understand that composition. I think hardest position this year is wing fullback. There's other than Yongi, there's no real guys that are unanimous. So
Yep.
be interesting to see how it plays out. And I mean, look, last year we saw Trell come out in the Vegas game, red hot 85
Yep.
to kickstart the season. Whoever had him was like looking great. So
It happened again.
they're important because they're the guys that are most likely to go for a boom game. And so if you start with the guys who's booming once or twice pretty early, then you got a head start.
Exciting times, man. Anyway, that is our last positional breakdown video. So we've done hooker, middle forward edge, half, center, and wing fullback. If you haven't watched the other ones, check them out. They're all on the channel. They're already up now. Thanks for jumping on, Biz, and I'll see you on the next video, man.
Yeah, see you on the next video. We're getting pretty close to our team reveals to end the preseason. It's not far off. That's going to be exciting.
Let's
So
do that next
stick
time.
with us. We'll, probably a few more bits of content before then. But great doing these positional ones with you. Hope this helped everybody. But great sessions.